Utpatti means how is it that this Shastra comes into being. A good deal of the classical texts, a good deal of the epics, they are all interchanges between the learned. In the classical period, or at least the period reflected in the text, the situation was very different from what prevails in our universities today. In our universities or centers of learning, people don't go from one department to another. So, if there is a lecture on literature, nobody from sciences would go and listen to it, no matter how eminent a person is coming, unless the person is of star value, you know, some Nobel Prize winner or something. In all these texts, what you find is there is one expert who is expounding on that subject. And there are various other scholars, munis, learned in their own field, eminent people in their own field who have come to listen. So this makes a reflection. I'm not trying to glorify ancient Indian situation. I am only pointing out that this is how most of these Shastras were created, because experts of different areas were willing to listen to one expert because they wanted the interchange. Remember, we talked about the idea of the interchange. If Valmiki writes a particular technical term, let's say if he uses the word murchana, or if he uses the word lay or tantri about the chandas of the Valmiki Ramayana, then where would he get these technical terms from? He'll get them from Natyashastra. Or, for instance, in the Ayodhya Kanda, you have a highly technical word called Shamya. Shamya is a way of showing tala. So, he says that here are musicians who are performing these hand gestures showing Shamya. Bharat Muni is not going to get his technical terms from Valmiki, which is a work of literature, kavya. It has to be the other way around. In other words, Valmiki was among the munis who came to listen to Bharat Muni. And so this interchange takes place, and this is how a particular Shastra travels to different experts. Then they would be able to take it. You see, you also have to see that what was the technology in ancient times. This is a slight departure from today's lecture, but it's essential for you to know. How were these texts preserved? They were composed, they were written down. Don't think that texts were not written down. Very, very early period, texts were written down. Then they were memorized as well. Then some kind of students who were very good in calligraphy would make copies of it. And there would be a whole tradition, a specialized tradition which would study that particular text. And that text would be preserved by that line of scholars. So hence you have the line of Brahma, the line of Nandi, the line of various Tandu, various other acharyas. Because these were, practically speaking, scholars, teachers, who preserved the text, who talked about it, who taught it to their students, and who observed the art and made additions in it, and who were in constant touch with the performer. Because the performer wanted to use that Shastra. The performer did use that Shastra all the time. So these traditions were living traditions. They were not just some fuzzy traditions or some set of Brahmins alone who were writing. I mean, this is a kind of a notion we have. No, these are practical people who were doing it, and the idea that only the Brahmins would do it or only the non-Brahmins for certain texts will do it is not true. I don't know if Bharat Muni was a Brahmin. There is no evidence to say so. Some people in Tamil Nadu think that he was, and there was a political statement a few years ago which I contradicted. I said, as a scholar, I see no evidence. So we have to look upon the very practical method of using these texts. I have been right from the beginning talking about how these texts were things which were of utility, not just an object of worship, as we tend to think now. Yes, any other question? All right. So now we go to the Utpatti Adhyaya, and it says that several scholars, munis, etc., they asked this question from Bharat Muni, and they said, you are the only person who can enlighten us about it. Yo ayam bhagavata samyak granthito veda samyataha Natyaveda vedaha katham brahman utpannaha kasya vakrate. This Natyaveda has been created for whom and for what purpose? Now here we are going to talk about another major issue. The term used here is Natyaveda, and the text is called Natyashastra. So what is the difference between Natyaveda and Natyashastra? Are they the same thing? Are they different things? We have to decide, we have to know. Yes, they are different and yet they are the same. Now you'll say this is a very mystical answer. No, there's nothing mystical about it. Knowledge is something which lives in a person. If you want to know what is great surgery, where will you find it? In a book of surgery? No. A book is not going to perform an operation. You find it in a great surgeon. But that surgeon dies. That surgeon becomes old. Sometimes the surgeon becomes very greedy and asks for too much money and loses reputation, as is the Greek myth about Asclepius, that he became greedy and he was cursed. Knowledge is always in a physical thing. It is enshrined in something physical. Remember what we talked about a little while ago, the relationship between Brahma and the body, the Pinda and the Brahman. So knowledge is Natyaveda. But when you come down to the practical performance of a certain art form, and when directions are given to you how to perform, how to do, then that is called Natyashastra. So the discipline of that performance is Natyashastra, but that knowledge itself is the Natyaveda. But what is most important is Natyaveda. Because the book is for the sake of knowledge. Knowledge is not for the sake of book. This body is for the sake of awareness and consciousness. Consciousness is not for the sake of this body and limbs, etc. It's the other way around. From one there is many. The many don't create one. That is essentially the message here, that Natyaveda is the knowledge. Now, they will then go on to the question, why is it called Natyaveda? But before that, they ask the question, how many parts does it have? How big it is? What is the actual prayoga, or the practical method in which it is to be done? What does it look like? All these things you should tell us. Now, answer to these 5 questions is the Natyashastra. I have made in brief this whole thing clear to you, the distinction between the Natyaveda and the Natyashastra. So the practicalities of the performing tradition as given in a particular text is the Natyashastra. That is the Shasanopayam. That is the methodology of learning and of performing. But the knowledge that you get out of performing, while performing, out of seeing the performance is Natyaveda. The story now, to make the whole issue more interesting, says that there was a time when the art form came into existence.